The concept of whitelisting has been around for a while, and basically it was one of the first security models that existed. And the whole concept was, hey, I'm only going to allow things to happen or change or be introduced into my environment that I know and trust. And a good example of that is the way that firewalls used to be configured. They were pretty much all locked down. And the first thing that an admin had to do was decide which ports were going to be open and what sorts of communications were going to be allowed. And so whitelisting, or the concept of a trusted list of what can be, what is acceptable, is really not a new notion, but there are some new things that we're doing and reintroducing that concept again into the security model. Blacklisting was sort of an approach to a problem that occurred in, say, the 80s, or early mid-80s of viruses and malware. And basically what happened was people realized, wow, there's viruses and these little malicious pieces of code, and we need to invent something or create something that can identify these things as being known bad and stop them. So blacklisting was good in its time to deal with the problem at hand. It was pretty effective. But what we've seen is that malware and the growth, there's an explosive growth of malware. And basically we don't scale to understanding, to being able to deal with malware just from blacklisting alone anymore. So what we're doing is actually combining some different approaches of both blacklists, of saying, hey, I know this thing's bad, with the concept of, gee, do I know that it's good or not? Do I have a reason to trust it? And so basically, where we're evolving from an endpoint protection sort of security model is saying, what are the different types of questions we can start asking about code as it enters a system, beyond just, do I know this thing is a known piece of bad malware? There's a lot of reasons why whitelisting should make a comeback, and is making a comeback. It's definitely a very secure model for managing endpoints. Some of the challenges to whitelisting have been how easy it is to implement and how flexible it is. It's very well suited for static environments, highly change controlled environments. There's no doubt that it really offers an awful lot of risk reduction and protection. I think what we're going to see moving forward is whitelisting that's a little bit more flexible and a little bit more intelligent, that can start to look at more than just is an application or piece of code on a whitelist, but things like, where did it come from, who's installing it, what sort of vendor signed this piece of code, and start to make informed decisions about the kinds of changes that can happen on an endpoint. And we're still also going to want to know, is this piece of code bad? We're going to start really looking on the fly and rapidly at the sorts of things that are trying to be installed and run and invoked on our systems, but really have a much more wealth of information about whether or not what our appetite for risk is, and whether or not we want to allow these things to run or not. Some of the challenges to the current state of whitelisting are that it's not an easy technology to just implement and walk away from. It really requires a fundamental shift in the way that we manage our endpoints. And basically, what we've got to do is actually first even understand what's in our environment, what's installed, what are the things that we should trust or assume that should be in our environment. Then we've got to understand, how do we introduce change into our environment? What are the agents of change in our environment? Right now, typically the agents of change are anyone and anything. Any user can install any application, any other application can introduce a new application. We don't really have, as a community or organizations, don't have a real good handle on what's in their environment and how should new things be introduced. So this concept of just laying down a magic whitelist that says, hey, here's the only thing that's allowed, and I can't really account for what should be introduced is a difficult proposition. So what we really need to start doing is looking differently at the way that we're managing endpoints, and go, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what I want in my environment. I also have a pretty good idea of who and what and how things should be introduced. So there is a little bit of maintenance on whitelisting as it stands today. I think that moving forward, what we'll see is whitelisting solutions that are far more intelligent and able to understand how things should be introduced, to give informed decisions or data points on how and what should be allowed to change. And I think that the management overhead is really going to be dropping moving forward, and the effort it takes to manage a whitelisting solution is going to be reduced. So moving forward, what's going to happen with whitelisting is that we're going to have very intelligent and flexible sort of engines that can look at a variety of different data points on what's being introduced. And we'll be able to look at a piece of code. As a new piece of code is introduced into a system, we'll be able to go, wow, is this thing known bad? Do we have a reason not to trust it? We're going to look at and see, is this thing known good? Do I have a reason to implicitly trust this piece of code? We're going to want to know, is this a wanted piece of code? Is this something that's business enabling, or is this a game, something that I don't want around in my environment? And then we're going to start asking different types of questions. Who's the user that's trying to introduce this piece of code? What application is introducing this piece of code? Did it come from a web browser? Is it being introduced by my systems management agent? And we're going to start going down this list and going, okay, wow, what are all the different reasons or ways that we should trust or allow this change to happen? And that's going to be happening dynamically and automatically by a policy-based engine. So we won't have to be making decisions manually or from an administrative point of view, should I allow this new thing to be introduced? We'll have the intelligence built into the system. The other thing that we'll have in the future with whitelisting is this concept of sort of a cloud-based service or understanding of what we're seeing. We're going to have the ability to go, wow, this is most of the applications that we can expect to see in a business environment. We know what they're supposed to look like from a very unique sort of hash-based digest. So we'll be able to give a lot of intelligence to the whitelisting solutions themselves. We won't be blocking necessarily pieces of code and hashes. We'll be allowing or blocking applications or classes of applications or vendors. And so those are some of the things that we're going to start seeing in whitelisting that are going to make it much more implementable, much more intelligent, and really deliver a lot of risk mitigation while also enabling the business.